you. I will ask now Stuart Kauffman to join us and take the floor. And while you are doing this, Stuart, Rida Ben Kirain is going to say a couple of words about you.
Yeah, stand here at the moment.
Well, stand and be counted. No, you can sit, Stuart. You can sit here and then you can take the floor.
Bonjour à tous. Pour cette troisième journée, nous avons Stuart Kauffman qui est avec nous. Alors c'est une grande joie parce que c'est vraiment qu'on parle beaucoup des sciences de la complexité. C'est un des fondateurs de ces sciences de la complexité dans le sens qu'il en a fait vraiment le design, le dessin, hein, dans le tout. Enfin, voilà, l'esquisse, mais aussi l'intention de les travailler. Il est médecin de formation, il a été disciple, très proche, pas disciple, mais très proche du cybernéticien Warren McCulloch. Il a été aussi, avec son ami Brian Goodwin, un des biologistes qui se sont attachés à développer une réflexion théorique appliquée à d'autres disciplines. Chaque fois, j'ai une capacité à qualifier chacune de nos personnalités scientifiques. Je dirais que Stuart Kauffman a une capacité absolument phénoménale de conceptualiser. Donc, c'est quelqu'un qui a produit une œuvre conséquente. Je voudrais quand même citer ses titres pour que vous ayez une idée du parcours. Il a des métaphores très utiles, l'adjacent possible. La structure mythique, mythical structure, c'est une structure, c'est un concept que j'ai moi-même emprunté, l'idée que nous sommes habités par une structure mythique dans notre manière de voir et de penser le monde, et que des fois cette structure mythique peut nous encamisoler, et qu'il faut s'en libérer pour inventer, créer une nouvelle manière de voir. Il est l'auteur de The Origins of Order, Self-Organization and Selection in Evolution, At Home in the Universe, The Search for the Laws of Self-Organization and Complexity, Reinventing the Sacred, A New View of Science, Reason and Religion, and A World Beyond Physics, The Emergence and Evolution. Bref, nous avons l'occasion de l'écouter et n'hésitez pas aussi, s'il n'y a pas la possibilité pour les étudiants, c'est un point important de poser des questions. Nos personnalités sont là toute la semaine, n'hésitez pas à les mobiliser dans les halls, dans le coin de la librairie, à l'extérieur et ils seront tout à fait ravis de pouvoir échanger avec vous. À vous, Stuart. The floor is yours.
Bonjour, alors. I've been a scientist for about 60 years now. I'm deeply glad to be here. I think Mustafa, Hasim, Reda, there is a sense of possibility that's in the air. The English word is portent, that things may unfold from where we are now, that we can just begin to glimpse. And it's lovely. I think we should take seriously the confused sense of what's next possible. So I'm going to talk on the title, The Inevitable Anthropocene and Our Choices Now. Even more broadly, I want to talk about a prolegomenon to a next axial age. If this is right, it's civilizational. And that's the portent that is here. Next slide, please. Oh, I make the next slide, sorry. Okay. My friend Jan Dijkstrahuis made this lovely image of a falsely colored fungus growing on a root of a plant. The central message of what we're in front of is that we're of nature, we're not above nature. In Western science, we've thought we were above nature for hundreds of years. And we have to get beyond that, and I'll talk about that a lot. So let me tell you briefly about the first axial age. Between about 800 BC to 200 BC, in many, many different cultures, 2,500 years after writing was invented, and between the ancient and the new empires, independently around the globe in independent civilizations, somehow humanity moved beyond the god of the hunt in search of something higher. For Plato was the good, the true, and the beautiful. And in that period, we got Confucius, the Buddha, Jeremiah in the Old Testament, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. It was a huge transformation in the way we are in the world, and all of our major religions derive from that era. Before I talk about this slide, I want to pause with where I was. I was realizing this morning, think for a moment of Francis Bacon in 1620 in Novum Organum, and he's moving us beyond Plato to modern science. The triumph of modern science is also its tragedy. The triumph of modern science is to master nature and gain control of it, and we have. At the same time, we're destroying the biosphere, and our own success has alienated us from the nature out of which we came. I think that we need to consider going back and being of nature. I'm going to talk about the adjacent possible in an equation that I wrote down, the TAP process. It carries implications for the cultural and the technological evolution across 2.6 million years. It's quite surprising, from Australopithecus to Cro-Magnon to China to us. And I'll just show you in a few slides. This is an amazing unifacial scraper from about 2.6 million years ago, from a young 16-year-old girl, Australopithecus. These are the exquisite pressure flake stone tools that Cro-Magnon had. This is the Great Wall of China. The first construction of it was around 700 BC to keep out the Mongolian hordes, and reassembled and reconstructed over later years. Notice the increasing complexity to now. That's Russian astronauts a few years ago on a spaceship. Just get the sense of the evolution from a few stones to where we are now. This is the equation in question. It's the only equation I've written in my life, and a whole large number of us are working on it. Let me explain it. I don't think I have a pointer, so I'll just use words. What I was thinking about a number of years ago, suppose that you have an economy at some time t that has mt things in it. I don't have a pointer, so you see mt. And I was wondering, how many things will you have in the next period? Well, you'll have the things that work now, but you might make new things out of what you have on hand. So that's this term to the right. And the idea is you can take one thing and reshape it, or you could take two things and combine them, like the printing press, which is a recombination of movable type, and a wine press. You could take four things. The Wright brothers airplane is a combination of a bicycle wheel, an airfoil, a propeller, and a light gas engine. So that expression MT with I written under it means MT choose I. So if MT is 40 and I is 1, you're asking how many things can I pick one at a time out of 40? And the answer is 40. If I is 2, it's how many pairs of things you can pick out of 40 things. And that's a very much larger number. And if it's 3, it's a still much larger number, and so on. So MT choose I goes up until MT is a half, then comes down. The symbol alpha is just meant to capture the idea that it gets harder and harder and harder to make something new. If you're trying to do it with 2 things, it's even harder if you're trying to do it with 10 things, and so on. So alpha I decreases in ways that you choose with I, and I is just the number of things. It's a very simple equation. It has just astonishing properties. Those are the people who worked on it. Wonderful Brian Arthur pointed out in The Nature of Technology, a wonderful book you should read, that technological evolution happens by recombination of things that are around. So does biological evolution. So TAP predicts 3 independent distributions: a hockey stick in the number of things, a hockey stick in the complexity of things, and strangely, a power law descent distribution for 3 million US patents. So this is led by Roger Koppel in constant dollar terms. This is per capita income for the last 2,000 years on good data. It will go back 20,000 years before that. So what you see is astonishing. Just look at it. Per capita GDP stayed stable globally for 2,000 years, and it started shooting up about 200 years ago. It's going up now almost vertically on a finite planet. So what? Well, this is the Anthropocene. This vast increase in wealth is simultaneously the Anthropocene. Now, does TAP bear on it? And the answer is it surely does. Here's our theory made into a slightly economic model. It has the property that for a long time nothing happens. It explodes upward faster than exponential. It reaches the continuous version, reaches infinity in a finite time, but has a pole. So the discrete process doesn't reach infinity, it just goes up faster and faster. So the TAP process is telling an increase in the number of things. What we think has happened is, over this time, the diversity of things made and traded has exploded. With the increasing diversity, there's increasing wealth, and that's what's driven the Anthropocene. So TAP actually is what's driven the Anthropocene, and that's why it's inevitable. It was bound to happen because of the TAP process. Meanwhile, if you reinterpret MT as the most complex thing made at time t, so if MT is 30, the most complex thing made at that time will have 30 parts. It predicts a slow increase, then a hockey stick explosion in both the number of things and increase in the complexity of things. So Australopithecus had about 10 similar stone tools. Cro-Magnon had a few hundred stone tools. If you don't know what an atlatl is, just look it up. It's pretty wonderful. But in the past 2 centuries, we've exploded to billions of different tools, and they range in complexity from knitting needle to the space station. They have. TAP is the first theory to begin to explain this. It may also explain in the evolution of life, probably does, the famous Cambrian explosion 550 million years ago, roughly 3 billion years after life started. This is a quite stunning slide. With patents, for every patent, legal patent, you can tell who its predecessors were. That's called the prior art. So for every patent, you can find out how its children and grandchildren are. And Sergi Valverde has now looked at 3 million patents in the US Patent Office from 1870 to about 10 years ago. For every patent, he sees how many children, grandchildren, great-great-great-grandchildren you have. And most patents don't have many children, but some have a lot. So if you plot on the x-axis the number of descendants you have, so it's log descendants, and on the y-axis, logarithm of the number of patents who have that many descendants, you get a power law, straight line on a log plot's a power law. It's got a slope of minus 1.3. So it's true. The striking thing is that TAP does the same thing. The same equation is predicting 3 completely independent distributions. It also predicts the acceleration of the rate of technological change. Andrew Little has shown that every time you add a new item to the system, the waiting time for the next item is cut in half. And that basically says, why are we having an enormous speed up in the rate of technological evolution? Okay, now, that gives us the inevitable Anthropocene. And the inevitable Anthropocene was bound to happen, as Roger Koppel says. It started at least 300,000 years ago when we made the first compound tools of a flint attached to a staff with hafted to it with a thong to make the first spear. This means lots and lots of things. The juggernaut global economy. The economy is, the American word is juggernaut. It will just, our problem is, our global economy is amazing, it is powerful, it has momentum that is unbelievable to continue. It's growing at 3% a year. It will continue to grow at 3% a year. There's wonderful features. This growing economy has lifted millions of people from poverty. It's yielded better health. It's yielded better food, better education. The problem is we're on a finite planet. Think of that vertical curve going up of GDP. It can't keep going up vertically. It can't. It can't. It is the elephant in the room. It's a herd of elephants. The Anthropocene is driving the climate change we know about. It's driving the extinction events we know about. It's driving soil degradation. The fact that soil is degrading means that we're invading more and more habitats as we try to sustain output, and that's driving wave after wave of pandemics that are now roaming around us. We have a decade to two max to fix it. And the economy is a juggernaut and it's not going to want to get fixed. That's an existential problem. It's a civilizational problem and it's a global problem, and we're not talking about it. And I was listening to the wonderful people from the World Bank, and it's wonderful. But what about the fact that we're driving the Anthropocene while we try to sustain economic growth? We're going to have to do something different, and I'm hoping that Africa can do something different than the rest of the world has done. Okay, so I'm now going to switch to a topic that is, I think, unexpected. And I'm perfectly glad and delighted that there are physicist friends in the room. I may be saying something. This is with my friend Andrea Rolli. It is, one part is published, The World is Not a Theorem. The third transition in science is currently in press, Journal of the Royal Society interface, out in a few months. It's surprising. See what you think. We may be wrong. So the question is, what does it mean to surpass the Anthropocene? How do we get through it? My view is that we need two things. We need a spiritual transformation, and obviously we need a transformation of praxis, both enormous. I truly believe that the profound spiritual lesson is in this, the third transition, and it's really that we are above nature, not of nature. It's not Western science for the past 500 years wishing to dominate nature and control it. I will show you, I think, just convincingly, we never will, at least for the biosphere. We just have to give up a pretense we should never have had. Okay, so Joanna Xavier is a quite astonishing young woman. I am on 2 of her papers. This is her brilliant work. I happen to be the inventor of a theory 50 years ago that the emergence of life is the emergence of collectively autocatalytic sets. So a collectively autocatalytic set is I catalyze the formation of a second copy of you out of 2 parts of you. You catalyze the formation of a second copy of Bill out of 2 Bill parts, and Bill catalyzes a second copy of me out of 2 Stu parts. Joanna has stunned many of us who work in the origin of life field. She has looked at every prokaryote, 6,700 archaea and bacteria. They all have small molecule collectively autocatalytic sets with no polymers in them, no DNA, no RNA, no proteins. This overwhelmingly suggests that molecular reproduction arose in the early universe as a phase transition to molecular reproduction on planets with a sufficient diversity of chemicals. So the Murchison meteorite formed 5 billion years ago in the solar system, has hundreds of thousands of compounds on it, and experiments are underway to match the theory that says if we do that, we'll get the emergence of collectively autocatalytic sets, and that therefore the emergence of life's that expected phase transition in the evolution of the universe, which is going to be major for a lot of reasons. So given an autocatalytic set, I wanted to find a Kantian whole. It's obviously Kant's ideas, and he was so stunningly brilliant. Gonan Ashkenazi in the Ben Gurion has made a 9-peptide collectively autocatalytic set. You see it drawn there with the little circles. So I'll say it, I'll simplify it as if it were a circle. Peptide 1 binds together 2 fragments of a second copy of peptide 2 and glues them together to make peptide 2. 2 does it for 3 and 3 for 4. So all of the peptides, each peptide makes a molecule that's the next type, and the whole set is a Kantian whole. Let me tell you what a Kantian whole is. This is a deep concept. Kant said an organized being has the property then that the parts exist for and by means of the whole. You're a Kantian whole. You have livers and kidneys and spleens. So you would not exist if you did not have a liver and a kidney or a spleen, but the liver and the kidney and the spleen exist because they're part of you and you have kids. So every living organism is a Kantian whole. This autocatalytic set is a Kantian whole. Each peptide is part of the collectivity of 9 peptides. The whole set reproduces by virtue of the catalytic activities of the peptides, so the parts, the peptides, exist for and by means of the whole. Fundamental idea. A rock is not a Kantian whole. A river is not a Kantian whole. A cloud is not a Kantian whole. Every living organism is. Now, I want to get to something. These are all important things. Steve Wolfram may be here this morning. We were debating whether he would be asleep. Because it allows us to define function. The function of your heart is to pump blood, but your heart makes heart sounds and it jiggles water in your pericardial sac. So this is crisp. It's a non-circular definition of function. The function of a part is that subset of its causal features that supports the whole. The function of the heart's pumping blood, not jiggling water in the pericardial sac. The function of one of those peptides is catalyzing the next reaction, not jiggling water in the Petri plate. Next step is fundamental. Selection acts at the level of the evolving whole, and it indirectly selects forever evolving parts. The parts are evolving to sustain the whole. That's why the heart has evolved to be better hearts. Therefore, selection is downward causation. Therefore, the explanatory arrows point upward, in complete contradiction to famous physicists Steven Weinberg and Kaku, who have claimed the explanatory arrows point downward and the causal processes point upwards. That may be okay for the abiotic universe. It's just false for evolving life. Fundamentally wrong. Okay. I'm going to get to the strangest thing and take time here. I'm doing fine. Andrea Rulli and I have claimed we have proven something astonishing. We cannot use set theory and all of the mathematics based on set theory to deduce the future evolution of the biosphere. There are physicists in the room, there's mathematicians in the room, and there's students in the room, and there's friends. See if we're wrong. But I'm going to take some time to unpack this because it's so unexpected. I'm not going to read the first paragraph. It says what I just said, and Andre and I have done this together. So I'm going to say a sentence and then make good on it. It has to do with the unlistable, unordered, disappearing, unlistable, unordered, indefinite, and non-deducible different uses of things, like a screwdriver or an engine block, alone or with other things. When you think about it, it becomes obvious, but it's not what we talk about. So think about a screwdriver. So I'm going to ask a question. What can you do right here in Marrakesh today with a screwdriver? Well, you can screw in a screw. You can unscrew a screw. You can wedge a door closed. You can scrape putty off the window. You can break the window. You can stab somebody. You can put it on the window as an objet d'art. You can tie it to a stick and spear a fish. You can rent the stick to somebody for 5% of the fish catch. You can lean it against the wall, put a piece of plywood on it, and put a wet painting on it to keep it dry in the rain, blah, blah, blah. Notice the following things. These different uses are just different uses of things. It's a nominal scale. There's no ordering relationship between them. One is not greater than the other. So there's 4 scales: nominal, partial order, interval, and ratio scale. The uses of things are just they're unordered. So let me ask, how many uses of a screwdriver are there? I mean, for example, is there 7 uses of a screwdriver? Well, that's just nuts. Are there 43 uses of a screwdriver? Or is it an infinite number of uses of it? How would we know? The strange thing is the number of uses of a screwdriver is something like indefinite or unknown. And what's powerful about indefinite is that it does not map to the real line. Furthermore, given the use of a screwdriver to screw in a screw, you cannot deduce that you can use it to spear a fish. I'll come back to that better. And we can't list all the uses of a screwdriver alone with other things. It took me 7 years to get to an engine block. So an engine block is a piece of steel that's, you make an engine from it. It's about a half a meter long, a third of a meter wide, and a third of a meter deep, and you drill 8 holes in it. And that's how you make an engine. So it's an engine block. What can you do with an engine block? Well, you can drill the holes and make an engine, but Andrea is an Italian. He said you can store wine in the holes. The engine block is rigid, and you can use it as the chassis of a tractor. In fact, that's how tractors are made. With an enormous leap of imagination, I realized you really can use it as a paperweight. An engine, it's heavy, but it's a good paperweight. And then with an enormous jump, I realized the corners are sharp, and you can crack open a coconut. It's the same thing that we said about screwdrivers. Here I am using the engine block as a paperweight. Can I deduce from the fact that I am using this object as a paperweight that I can use this object to crack open coconuts? No, because this object might be a banana. So I cannot deduce one use from the other. The uses are unordered. I cannot list all of the uses. I can't deduce the different uses, and the number of uses is indefinite. And that's going to lead to the following. I can sort of read it. So I'm going to tell you about the axiom of extensionality in set theory. So Andre and I were talking. I called him, I said, there's something strange about the axiom of choice in this stuff we're talking about. And we looked at this set theory is the foundation of all of mathematics, and it's got axioms. The first axiom is the axiom of extensionality. And it says two sets are identical if and only if they have the same members. Again, the axiom of extensionality says two sets are identical if and only if they have the same members. But I cannot prove that the uses of a screwdriver are identical to the uses of an engine block. I can prove that they're not identical because I can't list all the uses of a screwdriver, and I cannot list all the uses of an engine block. I cannot prove that the two uses are identical. That means we don't have the axiom of extensionality. That means we don't have set theory. Uses of things aren't sets. Furthermore, we don't have this weird axiom of choice. It's just wondrous, the axiom of choice. But the axiom of choice is identical to an axiom of well-ordering, but there's no ordering among the uses of things. So we don't have the axiom of choice. My mathematician friends, please hear it. I might be wrong, but we don't think so. So what does it mean? With no set theory, we don't have any numbers via Russell or Peano. So let's talk. Russell defines the number 1 as a set of all sets that have a single element. That would be the set of all objects that have a single use. Well, that's just nuts for things in the biosphere. Therefore, we can't define 0. 0 is a set of all things that have 0 elements, so we can't define 0. So we can't define 3. So we can't define 1 plus 3 is 4. So we can't get x plus 3 is equal to 11. We can't get equations. So we can't get quadratic equations. So we can't get the real line. We can't get square roots. We can't get imaginary numbers and complex numbers. We can't get spaces mathematically. We can't get vector spaces. We can't get manifolds. We can't get differential equations on manifolds. And because we don't have the axiom of choice, we can't integrate the equations of motion, so we can't even write. This is quite astonishing. What it means is we can use no mathematics. We can use no mathematics based on set theory to deduce the non-deducible different uses of objects that come to exist in the evolution of the biosphere or the economy. So I need to make this really clear. Evolution has in it something called Darwinian pre-adaptations, which are also called by Stephen Gould exaptations, where the same thing comes to be used for something else. I'll just tell you one example. Some fish have a swim bladder. The claim is that there were fish with lungs, lungfish. Some water got into some lungs. The same thing now, the lung is poised to become a swim bladder where the ratio of water to air tunes neutral buoyancy in the water column. A new function came to exist in the biosphere because the same thing came to be used for something else. The lens crystallins in your eye evolved from proteins that were enzymes. This kind of reuse of the same thing to do other things is all over evolution. It's why evolution is magical. So this is terribly important because of the following. If I give you a coin and I say, top it, flip the coin 100 times, how often will it come up heads? and you say, I wonder what the probability is that it'll come up heads 43 times. You just wheel up the binomial theorem and calculate it. But you knew ahead of time all the possibilities. In the case of the adjacent possible of the biosphere, we don't know the sample space of the process. We don't know what is in the adjacent possible. So not only do we not know what will happen, we don't even know what can happen. This is an enormous step to take. We live our lives forward, as Kierkegaard said. We make sense of it afterwards. So I just want to raise for the physicists and philosophers in the room, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle demanded abandoning classical physics. If Andrea and I are right that we can not use mathematics based on set theory to deduce the evolution of the biosphere or the global economy, what does it mean for science? It means something big. We may be wrong, but we don't think so. So I want to focus on this one. I fell in love with this with Andrea about a year and a half ago. Take it in. And the reason is that if you take it in and feel it, you won't look at the biosphere the same way ever again. So let's consider a bacterium evolving. It's a Kantian whole. And Andrea and I were talking to one another about a year ago, and we realized the following. Every one of the thousands of molecules in that cell stands ever ready to be co-opted for some unused causal feature that can be used in some new non-deducible function. Every molecule can get used for something else. But the myriad new uses must always be coordinated with one another because selection acts at the level of the Kantian whole. Just pause and hear it. Selection acts at the level of the whole bacterium. Molecules in the bacterium, in some environments, some molecule that used to, let's just talk about what a protein can do. It can absorb a photon, it can conduct an electron, it can bind a ligand, it can catalyze a reaction, it can vary a tension load, it can vary a compression load. A molecular motor can walk on the protein. Every molecule can be co-opted for something else, but those new uses have to be integrated because selection demands they be integrated because it acts on the level of the whole. That means that the biosphere is inventing things that we cannot say ahead of time because we can't deduce it, and it's doing it faster than we can. This means this is emergence, it's not engineering, and once you've got it, you won't look at evolving bacteria and think they're just bacteria. They're doing things none of us can even say. So evolution is a propagating construction. It's not an entailed deduction. This means something huge. It means that there's no law. There's no rules, there's no axioms. There's no rules of inference. The biosphere constructs itself. It means the physicist's dream of a theory of everything is false. It may work for the abiotic world. It will not work for a universe that contains an evolving biosphere. And Steven Weinberg would have been, I don't know what. Mikhail Kaku is a superb cosmologist who talks about the God equation. It's not going to entail the becoming of a biosphere. What I'm telling you is you cannot reduce the evolution of the biosphere to physics. Once there's something that exists, you can try to figure out how it worked. And the same thing's true for the global economy. Okay, what are our choices now? The first is global soil regeneration. Well, this is what I'm going to talk about. I've gotten fascinated by global soil regeneration. This is an amazing place to talk about global soil regeneration. We were talking about it last night. Many people in this room know more about it than I do, but I will tell you some of what I know. I think we can begin to talk about laws and structures to form global creative commons for medicine, for farming in many areas that link us together as a planet. We can emerge as a planetary culture if we form the structures and the legal structures that invite us and enable us to do so. Global Creative Commons is a way. I think the Global Creative Commons can democratize wealth creation and make meaning rather than money. This is from my friend Jan Dijksterhuis. That is the mycelium of a couple of fungi with a lot of bacteria on it. For the mathematicians, they're called organisms. I said that with a certain wryness. I love this that Jan sent me. Worms, they've been co-evolving with one another for 500 million years. So worms crawl through the fungi and eat them. But the fungi aren't helpless. The fungi have involved a gun cell. And when a worm crawls nearby, the fungus shoots a small molecular harpoon into the fungus, penetrates the fungus, and penetrates the worm, and the fungus pulls itself inside of the worm and eats the worm from the inside. So this is a dead worm, lost to the fungus. You think they're not smart? They've evolved a molecular harpoon to harpoon passing worms. Okay, so I want to talk about global soil regeneration. This is a tiny, tiny sample of all of the things happening in global soil regeneration. It's quite astonishing. If it's true, it's brilliant. I want to tell you about it. What I think at this point is that it's worth taking very seriously, but skeptically. David Johnson is a man in southern New Mexico, and he's been doing this for around 12 years. He invented an aerated bioreactor. It costs about $110. It's about 1.5 meters across, 2 meters high. When you build it, you put cones in it, or tubes. You fill it with leaves, water it a little bit, and 3 days later, you take the tubes out so air gets in. I can't read my own writing. Just a second. So he incubated this for 12 months, and he gets out about 250 to 300 kilograms of compost. The ratio of fungi to bacteria is 3.8 to 1, and by metagenomic analysis, there are thousands of species of fungi and bacteria. Here are the claims. First, what do? You take this compost, about 200 grams, and you dilute it in about 20 to 30 liters of water and just stir it. Then you soak the plant seeds and you plant the wet seeds. It requires about 2 kilograms per hectare. This is just amazing. It takes 2 kilograms per hectare. Claims. It increases the yield on the order of 120 to 140%. So rather than getting 10 grams, you get 24 grams. He's done this on tilled and non-tilled soil. I'll tell you what we've done. Second claim is, again, stunning. Almost published, but online on his site. On fields for corn and wheat, you can reduce by 85% any need for fertilizer. That's astonishing if true. The most astonishing claim is that 1 hectare treated with this material sequesters 30 metric tons of carbon dioxide a year. I'll come back to that. So here's what my young colleagues and I, Jan Dijksterhuis in Holland, and I, and John Crawford and eBlocks are doing. We are actually doing the experiments. It's pretty informal right now. It needs to be serious, but we're beginning. First question, can we soak the seeds, air dry them, and then use them? So we're trying that. Probably we can. That's crucial for practical uses of seeds, so that if you could do that and plant them later, you could, people could create the seeds and sell them. This is now the central thing. Can we demonstrate with statistical significant results for all major food crops? Can we do it, can we show that we get the yield that we need without fertilizers? I'm sorry. Can we get it without using fertilizers at all, or with fertilizers not using nitrates? We're going to need to replace phosphates and potassium. Can we show that this competes with fertilizers that use no nitrates? If we could, it's huge. The nitrates are what are eutrophying all of our waterways, and they're adding to the cost of fertilizers, which you all know much better than I do. So if we can get this to go, suppose that's true. Here's the dream, if we could show all of this. The hope is if it's true, could we show it in the next 2 years? So if that were true, the major hope is that we could increase the global yield at lower cost to farmers using Johnson's treated seeds sold to them at lower total cost because they don't have to buy expensive fertilizer, and the fertilizer companies are doing better. And because they're all using the treated seeds, it gets this material around the planet. We may need different composts in different areas of the planet, of course. We're trying something else that's fun. The root ball from a treated plant is about twice the mass of an untreated one, but the surface area is vastly larger. We're looking to see if the fungi and the bacteria on the roots come from and mirror those on the compost, not just the nascent soil. If that were to work, we could use the roots themselves, grown from treated seeds, and inoculate the soil. That would be an enormous help. So this could have a massive impact, meanwhile, on climate change. If it's really true that you can sequester 30 metric tons in a hectare, there are 2.5 billion hectares under cultivation, and I think I learned that 30 times 2.5 is 75 billion metric tons. We are emitting 39 billion metric tons. If this is true, to be tested, this would have massive impact on climate change while our governments are going around unable to do anything to stop what we're doing. Do I believe it? No. Am I skeptical? Yes. Do I think it's worth investigating? Absolutely. So that's what I wanted to tell you about that. These are lovely images that Jan has taken of the fungi growing on the roots that grew from plants treated with the compost, and his images are just amazing. Pretty. And for the physicists, do you think you could deduce the becoming of that from the Big Bang? If you think so, I don't think so. So I'm getting towards near the end. Think of soil. I mean, fungi and bacteria have been co-evolving with one another for 500 million years, and we've been here for 300,000. Think of soil as co-evolving multi-species Kantian wholes. And I'm now going to tell you what I think is the first deliberate experiment. Now, I haven't even said what the issue is. Evolving organisms create ever new possibilities with one another by which they get to exist. The global economy is doing that also. I'm actually earning a living getting up here lecturing to you. 50,000 years ago, we'd have been out hunting aurochs. We wouldn't be sitting around eating popsicles. The evolving economy has created ways we can make livings without doing what we did 50,000. So is the global biosphere. It's made ways to get to exist with one another. But we can't deduce the new possibilities that come to exist. I am falling in love with the idea that we can ask the biosphere, how do you create the new possibilities by which you get to exist with one another? We can't deduce what those new possibilities are going to be, but we can watch it happen. So here's the experiment. Okay, so here's the experiment. Jan and I are talking about doing this. We've got money for another experiment. I'm going to start with about 50 soil bacteria. Each one is DNA sequenced. I'm going to culture one bacterium species for a year. Then I'm going to co-culture 2. Then I'm going to co-culture 3, then 4, then 5, then 10, then 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50. So I'm just increasing the diversity of species that are co-evolving with one another. They're going to create ways to get to exist with one another. Can I see it? Yes, because they will create mutations that create and seize the opportunities that come to exist. I can use metagenomic analysis once a month to sequence all of the bacteria to see what mutations have come to be. This is a doable experiment in the next year or two. Nobody's ever done it. So suppose we do that and we plot the number of mutations that accumulate as a function of the number of species. Well, it may be linear in the number of species. If one species has so many, 2 species has twice as many, 3 species 3 times as many, or so K. But it might be the second order in the number of species. It might depend upon the number of pairs of species or triplets of species. We haven't the faintest idea. If it's more than linear, the species are creating opportunities with one another, new niches, new ways to make a living, and they're seizing them by heritable variation and natural selection. I'm in love with the experiment. We can begin to ask new questions. How does a biosphere create new possibilities? And I think all of this implies something amazing. We should not ask a single species to do something, ask the community to solve the problem, and we've never asked it before. Meanwhile, I happened to have made a patent many years ago on making libraries of random DNA, RNA, and proteins, just billions of random genes. Mark Balavi and I had the founding patent. It's an industry that's worth hundreds and hundreds of billions, and it's wonderful. We've started a company to try to apply the same thing now to COVID and to agriculture and human health. And I realized about 2 months ago, I have this co-evolving bacterial community. What happens if I use this technique that, as it turns out, I invented, to clone random genes, making random novel proteins every now and then into this colony? They'll have new proteins to work with. I think we could begin to discover at what rate, if we need to, can we positively mutate a bacterial community to solve problems? And then we have to be worried about putting new genes into the biosphere. It's an enormous portent for the future. This is going to transform agriculture. The part without the mutation is going to transform medicine. The whole thing may have enormous implications for agriculture. And my friend Sui Huang has come up with a phrase that's magical. He says, to mine the adjacent possible of the biosphere. Sui's right. Not by dominating it. We can't. We can participate in it. So I want to get to an end pretty quick. We need, if we think of Kantian holes, there are nested Kantian holes. A bacterium is a Kantian hole. A eukaryotic cell is a second-order Kantian hole containing a mitochondria and chloroplasts that are first-order Kantian holes. A multicellular organism is a third-order Kantian hole containing eukaryotic cells that are second-order, blah, blah, blah. You and your gut microbiome are a fourth-order Kantian hole. My guess is that the entire biosphere is nested Kantian holes, and we haven't thought about it, and so is the global economy, nested Kantian holes. David also thinks in these directions, and my wife Kate does. If that's true, and we're talking about collective action on a planetary scale, what would that mean? So one thought is that we create a distributed peer learning network, part of a global Creative Commons, a global Kantian whole. So some of us are now trying to create this platform in part with Microsoft, and wonderful John Crawford at University of Glasgow. The idea is to create a computational platform for farmers to own, store, and analyze, and share the data using modern computational tools, statistical and computational optimization tools. They can't even do a t-test. If we could extend this to global agriculture, to soil, we have ways to extend it now to medicine with my friend Lee Hood. We think for my company P4 Bios, my friends and I, we will transform modern medicine doing it. There's much more that can be done. We're just beginning to glimpse it. And it's obviously not just the few of us, it's just to get started. Now, suppose we can do this Creative Commons, and farmers around the world have the wherewithal to try small experiments with one another to vary the compost that they're using, the fertilizers that they're using, and the ratios of phosphate and nitrogen and potassium, but to vary the crops they grow. Farmers are entrepreneurs and they try things. In the United States, in the Southwest where my wife and I live, corn, squash, and beans, the three sisters, have been used for 1,000 or more years. They are mutualists. The corn makes the sugar, the beans captures the nitrogen, and the squash provides the shades. They're mutualists that help one another. How many plants can help one another, and how many animals, by turfing the soil, can help the plants? We've destroyed it all with monoculture. We haven't the faintest idea. If we set up a global Creative Commons with respect to agriculture, and we have millions of people trying experiments and sharing the information with one another, we can, this word outsource is stupid. We can do something very different about how we do science together. We learn to do it collectively with practice on the ground, assembling it and sharing the information. I think that we can do it. We just have to get it underway in some way that is harnessable. But this democratizes wealth creation because 3 farmers in Bangladesh come up with a bright combination of plants that's another 3 sisters. They know it, they own it, and the money flows to them, not the giant corporations. So this democratizes wealth if we can do it, and it also is a sharing economy where telling the truth matters. There's no point in lying. We're full of society now sucked into echo chambers by social media destroying the body politic. So this invents a new way to do distributed science. I think we can do it, and it is a pathway to a global way of coordinating with one another. So this really is something like, this is overbold. I'll try to say it the following way. I was thinking about it driving in. What is it that's underway? Francis Bacon in 1620 said, he didn't quite say it, but he said, put nature on the rack and rest our due. He didn't say it, but the meaning was for Western science, us. The glory of the last 5 centuries is find out how nature works and by God control it. We're not going to control the biosphere. We can't deduce what it's going to do. We can't pre-state what it's going to do. We can participate with it. But to participate with it means we really are of nature, not above nature. And to borrow my friend Sui's wonderful phrase, it's not even that we want to mine the adjacent possible of the biosphere. We want to participate with it and learn how to use the enormous capacities of the biosphere to create a lot of what we want to create. In a sense, we don't need more skyscrapers and we don't need more concrete. We need to come to know how the biosphere does it. It's been doing it for 4 billion years. It's overstated, obviously, but it's something like being in the world in a different way after 500 years of glorious Western science. So it's towards an eco-civilization. We need practicality, and I think, at least for me, the spiritual part is we really cannot dominate nature. We really are of nature, not above nature, and this is not what we've thought for hundreds of years. So there's a pathway, maybe. Thank you.
Stay here for 1 minute. I have 3 questions for you. Thank you, Stuart, for very inspiring, very interesting talk. As you know, we cannot take questions from the audience for practical reasons, but I will again abuse my privilege as moderator to make 3 quick remarks. One of them is even a question. First of all, you quoted Francis Bacon, Novum Organum, to discard this idea that you should be master and owner of nature. Stuart, please, if you are in a French sitting, talk about Descartes. Yes, because actually Francis Bacon and Descartes was contemporary, and they said exactly the same thing.
Oh, did Descartes
yes, we did. We quote always Descartes in the Discours de la Méthode by saying, by science, he said, science, nous nous rendons comme maîtres et possesseurs de la nature. We have become master. C'est la même chose. C'est la même chose. Master and possessor of nature.
That's at an era in which the machine is dominating us, and it's before Newton gives us the world as a machine.
Absolutely.
And we've lived. In fact, I think it's so big. We've lived with the machine image at least since Copernicus.
Yes.
The world is a machine. If Andre and I are right, the biosphere is not a machine. It's not a machine. It constructs itself. It constructs its own expanding phase space. It can't be deduced. It's the end of the dominance of the machine image.
Yes, and Descartes wrote his famous sentence about to become master and possessor of nature by science is 1637, and Newton was born in 1642. Newton was not even born, that Descartes has already that idea. Well, yeah. The second observation is that I've seen that you say something about élan vital.
Oui.
Well, as you know, the last French philosopher who was
Henri Bergson.
Henri Bergson.
Bien sûr.
I was going to Henri Bergson.
Non, mais c'est ça, exactement.
Yes, but in France, Henri Bergson is kind of discredited. So,
no, I know.
You know. So
I'll defend him.
I admire you for trying to resuscitate Henri Bergson. That's what you're trying to do, right?
Yes,
in a way.
I think he would have been glad. So may I just speak about it briefly? There are 3 closures, autocatalytic. I actually do, it'll take a minute, but it's worth
1 minute.
Okay. There's a beautiful idea due to Matteo Matteo Mozio and Mael Monteville that I really want to convey. It's an exquisite ideal. The start is the following. What's work? It's force acting through a distance. Then Atkins says, no, work is more interesting. It's the constrained release of energy into a few degrees of freedom. So you're supposed to picture a cannon and a cannonball and powder. The cannon is the constraint and it's the boundary condition. And because it's there when the powder explodes, you don't get a spherical wave, and it propels the ball. And even I realized many years ago, at the Big Bang, there were no cannons. So if it takes constraints to make work, where do the constraints come from? And I didn't know how to solve it. Here's the idea that these guys had, and it's brilliant. I want work, so I need some non-equilibrium processes. I can just let me have 3 non-equilibrium processes, 1, 2, and 3, but I want to constrain them, 3 constraints, A, B, and C. Just pause and hear it. So I have 3 constraints, A, B, and C. A constrains the release of energy in process 1 to construct a B. B constrains the release of energy in process 2 to construct a C. C constrains the release of energy in process 3 to construct an A. Just take it in. Their brilliant idea is, in a constraint-closed system, the constraints constrain the release of energy that does the work to construct the constraints. An automobile doesn't construct its constraints. Living cells do. An autokinetic set achieves constraint closure. And it's a stunning idea. Once you get it, you know, how could they have thought of it? It's so brilliant. And if you put together constraint closure, autocatalysis, I think that is élan vital.
Yes, that's a form of vitalism in a way. That's exactly that. Well, my first remark, we have very clever, distinguished mathematician in the room, so I will ask my question under their control, Chaitin, Eklund, Wolfram. You said quite boldly that without the axiom of choice, there would be no mathematics.
No, I didn't say that.
You said that.
No,
you actually wrote it.
Oh, what I should say is, without set theory, without the axiom of extensionality, and without the axiom of choice,
yes.
and without the axiom of choice, put them together. Our claim is we can't do any mathematics based on set theory.
I'd love to hit Chaitin and Eklund and Wolfram on that point.
No, I kind of thought they might have comments. Steve may be here. He said he was going to sleep this morning.
All right.
So I challenged him to be here and beat me.
Yeah, but they spotted Chaitin and Eklund somewhere. Thank you very much.
Voilà.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.